Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast, where we discuss all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.
What's going on, Zoe?
Not a whole lot. How you going?
Yeah, not too bad. Been doing some boxing.
Boxing?
Yeah, loving it. Yeah, I enjoy it quite a lot because it's quite mentally challenging. It's not as simple as it looks. I think people just think that you're just flexing and wailing and throwing punches here, there, and everywhere. It's actually, I like it because it's almost like a game of chess. You make one bad move, you're gonna get messed up.
Have you got messed up yet?
No. I'm practicing. I'm only like 2 months in, so
okay.
Just learning the skills. I'm really enjoying the process of learning new skills, and especially coming from a contact sport background, playing rugby league and whatnot. It's something I actually particularly enjoy is like learning some different skills. When I thought I was okay at throwing a punch, and I was like, probably not. So, and because I've been taught, because the instructors there are really good, and one of the members here is into martial arts. He's been showing me some little tips, and watching Mike Tyson back in his heyday, especially even when he was a junior as well. That's actually really cool. And, I was 13 years old, and he was a prodigy at that age, and he was already jacked as it was, and he was world champ. I think he was 21 when he was world champ, and I was like, I have no aspirations to become a world champ, but I just enjoyed the process and watching him, and I'd like to emulate his style to some degree as well.
Fair enough.
Enough about me though. But we actually, boxing is actually a relevant sport because it actually kind of ties into, or a lot of combat sports have this issue as well. We're going to be talking about Red S. Mm-hmm. Now, what is Red S?
So Red S is relative energy deficiency in sport, which was previously known as the female athlete triad, but has now been proven that it occurs in male and females. So that's why we've kind of moved on to a new term. But it's basically overtraining and underfueling. So where there's not enough energy available to perform the work your body actually needs to perform. So especially when individuals are completing a lot of sport, they need to eat a lot more for their bodily processes to actually occur and function.
So basically, it used to be known as the female athlete triad, and they thought specifically it was associated with females, but now we know that is not the case. It's basically a general term when athletes tend to underfuel themselves in order to perform, and this is pretty prevalent in actually quite a lot of sports that are where body weight becomes a bit of an issue. Right, so I think of long distance events, so cycling, running, swimming, they're like your key ones. Mm-hmm. And there's gymnastics or anything that you have to have a specific shape or size, or where a specific shape or size is not congratulated, it's not the right term, but idolized, I would say that
idealized
as well. Or kind of like that's the kind of the norm.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah, that's it.
They push the norm to having a certain body shape, and reduction in calories is seen as the quick way of getting there. Combat sports is another one as well, where it can be quite dangerous, but that is becoming a bit more calculated in terms of how they do it as well. But yeah, I guess why is it an issue, especially with young athletes? Why is it an issue today?
Yeah, well, so obviously if you're not consuming enough energy for your body to function properly, then a lot of different things can come from this. Something common is estrogen levels can be really low, which has an impact on our bone health, and so stress fractures can become really common. And even just the menstrual cycle obviously is not ideal to be losing a menstrual cycle, but hormone functioning as well can be decreased, which has a huge impact on training, a huge impact on lifestyle, and just overall bodily function and well-being. Another thing is mood. So low estrogen and testosterone levels can really impact your serotonin uptake, which is a hormone that makes you feel happy.
Feel good.
Yeah, feel good hormone.
And then, feel good.
Yeah. So then can impact on your drive, your motivation levels, basically just a lot of different aspects of life, because obviously we need energy for our body to function, and then that gets everything going as well as our brain as well. Because
if it's associated with motivation to complete tasks, and if that's on a decline, we're not likely to do things, and that becomes like the merry-go-round that you're stuck in, or that perpetual cycle that you're always stuck in order to get to not, you won't get things done, essentially. So, and how does this really play out? And on a depending on the order of the podcast. But I'll give an example. So personally for me, I suffered a knee injury. I won't go too much into the story, but I felt like I was in this. I was kind of like, I didn't need to drop weight essentially, but I ended up under-fueling myself because I wasn't doing as much physical activity, but I was overtraining as well at the same time. And as a result, I felt depression-like symptoms. I was tired, lethargic, and just didn't really perform well. Then I took a break from training, ate a little bit more. My energy levels got back really quickly. So I kind of caught it quite early. And so for some people, this could be months, if not years, of experiencing red S. And can be quite crippling and debilitating. Some people will end up in hospital as a result for malnourishing their body, and the body's just trying to run on fumes, essentially.
Yeah, and if you think about it, so your body obviously needs energy to fuel everything, but if you think about it as in your blood flow and your energy is going to be redirected to the areas that needs to be worked, needs to be used. So if you are overtraining, all this energy is going to go to your muscles, and then your organs and your hormones and all of that sort of stuff receiving, and the brain isn't receiving the energy that it needs. So then these processes are going to slow down a little bit. And then when that happens, so many different issues come into place as well.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. So on a previous podcast, I spoke with Nathan about, you know how strength training stunts your growth, right? I'm like, that's absolute BS. It's only if you excessively load them over long periods of time. The other way that you can actually stunt someone's growth is actually through nutrition deficiency. So whether or not they get enough energy, also enough micronutrients as well. Mm-hmm. And that really does affect kids negatively. You go to, African nations where food is very scarce and nutrient-dense foods is quite scarce, and you'll notice that the kids are quite malnourished when they're actually growing up and remain quite thin and frail as a result. But they do adapt to the situation in their environment. For us, in Australia, where food is quite bountiful, we kind of make that active choice or deliberate choice, not really based on any specific guidance or based on what's been popularized through social media, or a certain athlete follows this diet or whatever it may be, rather than looking at the individual needs.
And so this can come up in conversation quite a bit, where especially youth athletes are so curious about what to eat, what's the best fuel for themselves, how much to eat. They don't know. They might think they need to be lean, but we always go for, you want to be eating the rainbow. You want to be eating all the different, so protein, carbs, everything like that. But you also don't want to be cutting out absolutely anything that's deemed as unhealthy, because we need to be eating enough energy. And I think for some of our lean youth athletes, they might not be eating enough, which also means they need calorie-dense food. So I think it's a common theme for those who are striving to do really well in their sport, to be like, I need to cut out everything, or I need to be eating a strict diet. But again, we need to be eating enough. We want to be eating quality, but we still need to be eating enough food. Yeah,
quantity needs to be there as well.
Yeah.
And we see this all the time. We, when the kids come in for the first time, we get them filling a food diary. Some kids really severely undereat, by a lot, because they eat maybe some very nutrient-dense foods and kind of miss the point. So what we've done in the past is we've kind of just have discussions. Okay, cool. If you're training, for a swimmer, right? Because we look after a lot of swimmers. If they're in the pool, 10, 12 hours, even 14 hours a week, then they're in the gym, 2 to 3 hours here as well. Then they got school, they got social life, they got school sports. It's a lot of physical activity and a lot of brain power required throughout the day, or even throughout the day. So we got to make sure that we, number one, in order supporting that energy demand, but number two, supporting the energy demand for growth and development as well, especially for the younger teens here that, at the early stages of puberty, their energy requirements do increase over time. And that's something that does get neglected, or not deliberately neglected, but it's just not understood, whether it's because of a lack of education in our school system, or parents just don't understand because of a lack of time or something like that. I think we need to go back down to bare bones and teaching people how to what does a good day of eating actually look like for a youth athlete, and in conjunction to what they're doing throughout the day.
Yeah, and that's a whole big thing. So one of the big red flags is feeling really tired, and also just the low drive and the low motivation. So then if a child or a youth athlete is feeling like that, instead of just thinking, are you getting enough sleep, which is obviously very important, but the food is so important to be figuring out if they're eating enough. And I think another thing that kind of is brought down through parents is, are you eating that much, or are you eating like not enough? But it's just, it needs to be the open conversation, and it needs to be kind of worked out together.
Yeah, some parents have it's more about the way they put it. With some parents, it's more about, it's like, go on, you got to eat this, and there's no like real justification behind it. Kids want to know why. They won't ask why, but they actually do want to know why. So if you tell them why this is going to make you big, strong, blah blah blah, it's going to help you recovery and perform, then a couple of hours later they experience that they actually felt pretty good, didn't pull up as sore. Great, we're in a great position. They understand this buy-in, and you've seen a cause and effect with that. If you're just saying like, you just got to eat it because I said so, teens, they're smarter these days. That shit won't fly. Yeah. And unfortunately, they'll cause some level of resentment. It's like, I'm going to eat less because I just don't like, the what's been said about it, or something like that, or I just don't understand, or whatever it may be. If kids understand, if majority of kids understand, this is the general rules. There are some exceptions to this. If they understand why and the needs, and they feel it in their performance or the recovery, and the buy-in's there. So that's one way to actually rectify that one.
Absolutely. And we have muesli bars here at the gym. So many of our athletes have noticed that they might come from school and they might not have eaten something. It's like, okay, have a muesli bar before you start. And they know immediately that they feel so much better.
Yeah.
So it's just simple fixes like that.
Yeah.
Simple inclusions.
I know some of them made requests for like up and goes, Jabanis, and I'm like, all right, maybe down the track, but
stay posted.
Yeah. Well, that's a goal, and but I'll save that one for later. Then I think the other one is a lack of drive from the athlete as well when they're experiencing red S, or they're laser focused on specific things, or on just training. They're not having a life outside, and we can't make training our life, or we can't make a sport our life, because what happens when the sport's taken away, whether it's through injury or you don't get selected and all that jazz, and your identity is completely tied up in that. So that can be another red flag in terms of the drive. But I think this is more for the guys, is kind of like that, the arousal of that drive that they get as boys. I think that feeling of that feeling that boys will get as they go through puberty, if that doesn't drop, or does drop or doesn't even occur, then usually they're going to be in some sort of energy deficiency, specifically with that.
Yes, that's another thing. It's not just females, like the female athlete triad. This is males and females, because it is both hormones. It's estrogen and testosterone levels can be low, which impacts everyone. Yeah.
So, and specifically boys that want bigger muscles, they got to make sure they eat more. It's pretty simple there. It keeps testosterone high with that. And testosterone, obviously, it's very anabolic in its use. Helps us to build cells, build tissue, recover. It just it basically just makes boys again, boys to men, essentially, with that.
Which is why some specific things to look out for. So if it's reoccurring soft tissue injuries, but also if you feel like your training isn't progressing, so if you don't feel like you're growing, or you don't feel like you're getting stronger, that could be due to low testosterone levels, as Trent was just saying. Yeah,
and that's obviously associated with diet as well.
Yeah.
And look, at the end of the day, we usually say, can you get your sleep under control, your diet under control, your training volume under control, and your frequency as well, and stress, and manage stress. And if you've got those key pillars in place, and we have regularly talked about this with our members here, and even a little bit on the podcast, if you can get those pillars under control, then it will actually clear up a lot of issues. 100%. And for us, and especially working with a lot of female athletes and swimmers here, working on their diet has actually helped improve their sleep, in terms of just making better choices and modifications. Eating more protein helped with their recovery as well, because a lot of the girls were under eating protein, so it's helped with their recovery. If not, it's actually helped them actually inadvertently they've dropped weight, their performance has improved, and they're eating more. So the body is actually starting to run on all cylinders. So we're seeing completely, when we make minor modifications, kind of the manifestation later on down the track with their performance and just the way they feel.
Yeah. And as I always say, open conversations, but you need to be speaking to your coach if you're feeling any of these red flags that we've been talking about, and whether it's mood, whether it's drive, whether it's feeling tired, because hopefully your coach is aware about all these different things as well, and you can work together to kind of figure out what's going on. You can go through every single little thing. You can go through your sleep. You can go through your nutrition. You can go through each aspect and work on it slowly, and then kind of figure out what's going to make you feel better and where you can actually go from here.
Yeah, so start with the low-hanging fruit. What can you immediately change? Most people, it's diet. Most people know that diet is trash. As soon as they start tracking it, it's like, this is really bad. I probably should make some changes here. You start making some changes, ask some people that understand, good nutrition practices, and go from there. And just slowly build up and do one thing at a time, and slowly and surely you'll know what works, know where to spend a bit more of your time, rather than just be going straight to a specialist or an endocrinologist. Like you should only be going to like a specialist if you haven't really dealt with the obvious stuff first. And most people don't do a quick self-audit if they're doing the obvious stuff well at all.
Yeah, and that's it. Because so RED-S has been showed from recent studies that a lot of individuals, a lot of athletes experience at least one of these symptoms. I think it was 15 to 65% of athletes in these studies showed at least one symptom, and I think it was above 50% showed at least two symptoms. So it's not like it's not common at all. So most athletes will obviously experience stress, will probably have a bit of issues with their eating, whether it's enough, not knowing what to do. It's just kind of like a working process. There is no definitive answer to, you have RED-S if you've got this. It's more of a, what can we focus on? What can we kind of work towards if we're experiencing a few of these symptoms?
Yeah, and it's not a quick fix. You got into this problem and it took a long time to get here. It's going to take, it's not going to take as long to get out of it because you've got more awareness around it. But you just got to give it a bit of time and patience. But then obviously tracking that over time as well. But from an individual perspective, what can we do?
As I continue to say, conversations. It's really important to have a trusted coach. Whether a sporting coach, we know, is a lot focused on the team, but if you can find a strength coach or a PT that you can just talk to about all of this sort of stuff. Obviously, they're in this industry because they know about all the different pillars of health. They want to help you. They want to work with you to do all of this. So you just need to have someone that you can ask lots of questions with and kind of monitor, which is another thing. Tracking your exercise and tracking your nutrition might be necessary, might not be. Exercise definitely. But if you can track your exercise and see where you're going over a long period of time, and then if you want to track your nutrition as well, and then you can see the differences. If maybe you've increased your exercise intensity and your food stayed the same and you're feeling tired, well, maybe it's because you're not eating enough. Or if it's the other way around, if your food stayed the same, but you've increased your exercise intensity and you're feeling tired, maybe you need to increase your nutrition, your food intake.
Yeah. Cool. It's all the small changes. And for parents, I think the biggest thing for them is, I don't know because I'm not a parent myself, but a lot of parents do work full-time as well. And I think it'll be worthwhile is to monitor the times that you actually are with them and using that as a bit of a yardstick of seeing how they're actually feeling and performing. Whether you go to trainings and you're observing how they train, talking to the coaches, that'll be an obvious one. That'll be a really good one actually. But then at dinner time, how's their mood?
Yeah.
Are they very conversational? Are they talking more? Are they talking less? Are they eating more? Are they eating less? What's their mood around the table as well? And just monitoring that. And it might be something as a parent, you might just take a note and just see if they're eating all their food. At a 1, 2, 3, 1 is barely enough. Number 2 might be, normal. Then 3 might be a lot more than normal. And then you can see you have some sort of data over a week or a couple of weeks or something like that. Their mood, you might just mark that at 1, 2, 3 again as well. So 1 is quite their normal, number 2 is normal, then number 3, are they chatty Cathy for some reason. I don't know, they maybe had some caffeine, or they're at the mate's place and had half a bag of lollies. I don't know, who knows. I think having some way of monitoring and keeping inventory of all this data and tracking it, then you have more evidence or a bit more of an understanding that things are not quite right, but you may not know where to go as of yet as well. So talking to the strength coach, talking to the sports coach, potentially talking to the sports trainer there as well, and start to become a bit more educated as yourself as a parent, I think is a good understanding. And, I've referred, parents to watch and listen to other podcasts, whether it's Eric Cressy, for baseballers, we got a young baseballer here, talking about, athlete development specifically, what the parents should be focusing on to help their kid to flourish, whether it's ours or whether it's someone else's, and providing resources or just, quick sound bites, to the athlete. I think or even to the parents, and just because what we do is as well here, the parents, we write parent reports every quarter at the end of each term, and we just basically write down 3 things that we've noticed in terms of how they're progressing. Then we actually ask for feedback from the parents. Like, what are some key things that they think or feel that they're not seeing, or that they still feel like their kid is struggling with as well, and then how we can continue to support them as well. Because ultimately, they're coming to train here in order to get better.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, as a parent, you know that your child is not going to listen to you all the time.
As teenagers.
But it needs to be open, and you don't want to be the one telling them you should do this, you should do that. You kind of want them to initiate it as well. You just kind of plant the seed where it comes to something like food at the dinner table. If you're wanting your child to eat more, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to force them to finish their plate. You might just have different options, because at the end of the day, you want the best for them. Yeah,
and an easy way is, don't let the inmates run the asylum. That's what I tell a lot of people here. Always take charge, but there's a few ways that you can feel like you're giving initiative to the kids when it comes to making food choices or something like that. Number 1, get them coming with you as well. Get them choosing what they might like. So whether it's like a muesli bar or yogurts or something like that, get to choose the flavors that they like. So if they're more bought into what the process and where the food is coming from and where they're getting it from, and they've actively made that selection, there's going to be a high degree of compliance with that. And number 2, when it comes to making dinners or lunches or something like that, I started making my own lunches when I was in grade 2. That's another story for another day. But when it comes to dinners, right, giving the kids the option of A and B. We can either this or that. That's it. I'm not having, takeout or anything like that. I'm making this or that. Mm-hmm. What do you want?
The power of choice as well.
Yeah, and giving them the bit of initiative and choice in that. Then if you want them to try something a little bit different or a little bit new, right, you might do the same thing. You might repeat that process. Like, we're going to try this or try that.
Yeah.
And then you just go from there. We'll wrap it up.
Yeah, so overall the things we're going to look out for is obviously sleep and nutrition. And then recovery-wise, we just want to make sure that our athletes are feeling their best. So if you notice that anything is slipping, that's when we just have the conversations about kind of overall well-being. It's not like you necessarily are going to be able to track at what point something's happening, but it's just the overall well-being that we can then work towards.
Yeah, cool. That's it. Sweet. If you like this, please subscribe. We're on YouTube and Spotify. Please like the episode as well. We want to be able to get this information to out more parents. We think it's just such a neglected area, and people don't realize until there's an actual problem with this. If your kid does experience any of these signs or symptoms, please, you can reach out to us and we can point you in the right direction on where to go and who to speak to as well. But other than that, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.